I'm Dr. Jocelin with your weekly health tip, and today I'm going to welcome you to my kitchen. I'm going to make a healthy item, collard greens, taste really yummy. A couple of weeks ago, I was traveling with Mark for some training, and we went to one of the organic dairies in Indiana, and they have a restaurant there, and they served the most amazing collard greens. I grew up in the South. My grandma and my great aunt loved collard greens, but I didn't really eat much of them. But let me tell you, the best thing on my plate was collard greens that night. So I was bound and determined to have a way to recreate that recipe that Mark and I enjoyed while eating at the restaurant. So I'm starting out here in my pan with 2 tablespoons of organic salted butter. And I've got an onion. I've partially been chopping it because I didn't want you to stand here watching me chop an entire onion. But this is a whole onion that I have sliced into kind of these longer slices. And then I am going to finish slicing it and put it in the pan. And while it's starting to cook, we're going to work on a few other parts of the recipe. So this is one of our organic onions from the store. They've got great flavor, but they're not like so oniony that all you're gonna taste is the onion. And when you put them in the butter and cook them until they're translucent, which is step number 1 of the recipe, it really makes a nice rich flavor without being super oniony. So now that I've got my onion chopped, my hands are clean and washed, I'm just gonna pick these up. And you'll notice that I chose one of my largest skillets in the kitchen, and I wanted to make sure that I had lots of surface space for the heat to be able to evenly cook these onions. All right, so I've got my pan with my onions and butter in it. I'm gonna take it over here to the stove. Go ahead and turn it on. I like to cook on about a 5 or a 6, and it just gives it a nice even heat without overcooking that butter and turning it too dark. Meanwhile, I'm going to come back over here and go ahead and slice my garlic because that's going to go in the next step. And I want to have my parts and pieces that I need ready, but it helps to make my time a little bit more productive while I'm waiting. Now, I've seen different variations of this recipe. Some people say to chop the garlic, to mince it. Obviously, you can do what you think your family is gonna like best. At the restaurant, there was the sliced pieces, which I think has to do some with visual appeal, but some people will talk about you get better flavor if they're sliced. Some people will say you get better flavor if they're crushed. So I like to use a variety in my different recipes depending on what I'm cooking, the flavor and the look I'm going for. So today I'm just gonna slice it up, and I'm gonna have that ready and waiting for when my onions are translucent. So they're gonna heat up here. They're gonna take a couple of minutes to come up and cook until they're translucent. And while they're doing that, I've got all my other ingredients ready other than my collard greens. Now I've got a bowl here of coarsely chopped collard greens, and this is 1 bunch. The recipe calls for a pound of collard greens, and each of the current bunches we have at the store are right around 8.5 to 9 ounces. So I went ahead and pre-chopped one, and then I'm gonna chop this other one. And the trick with collard greens is you don't wanna get these large stems in there. These smaller ribs and kind of spines that you see that make up the leaf are fine, but these large stems can be bitter. So you wanna avoid using that. So the trick that I've learned, being a good Southern girl, is just cut these ribs out with a nice triangle, kind of looks like an Indian arrowhead. And we're gonna cut that out, and we're gonna pull this to the side, and that gets a majority of my stems out. Now I'm gonna double check, and it looks like I've got a little bit of thicker stems right down here, but I'm still gonna go ahead and pull them out as well. And I'm gonna just kind of go through here and pull any of the good greenery off and separate the stems away because I want to save these delicious leaf. Your dark leafy greens are full of nutrients. If you've been around the health food industry, you've seen all of the green protein powders, you've seen the green smoothies, you've heard things mentioned of eat your greens, eat your colors, all of these different things about nutrition. And obviously you're getting a plant that's rich in chlorophyll and a lot of other nutrients because of its dark green leafy color. But you also have to make it taste good, where especially the children will eat it. So adding some extra ingredients can make it a little more palatable for everybody in the family. So almost done chopping it here. All right. If I find any extra pieces of stem that are a little extra coarse, I might pull those out. I'm gonna add them here to my bowl. And then we're gonna let that onion finish warming up and cooking. And as soon as it turns translucent, we'll be right back. Welcome back. So my onion has cooked until it's starting to turn translucent here for a couple of minutes at temperature. So what I'm going to do now is add the sliced garlic that we sliced not long ago. Get that stirred in so it starts to cook. And you'll notice that nothing is cooking until it's done at this point. I'm basically getting it to kind of activate and start seasoning the way I want it to, and it's gonna cook for 45 minutes with the collard greens in a broth base. Now I'm going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of Himalayan pink salt here to the onions and garlic. And I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of organic black pepper here. And I'm just going to keep this stirred for about a minute, letting that garlic start to really kind of activate its juices. And I know you can't smell it, so I'm going to smell it for you, but oh, it's starting to smell really good, giving off that nice butter, onion, garlic flavor. You can smell those oils activating in here, which is exactly what you want it to be. Now I'm going to add my pounds of coarsely chopped collard greens that we chopped just a little while ago. And I'm going to start stirring these in here for a couple of minutes. And my goal is to start wilting them and letting them get thoroughly coated with the butter, onions, and garlic. And you're just going to keep gently stirring to get them down in there. They're going to be fluffy, and this is why the larger saucepan was pretty crucial for the recipe, in my opinion. Obviously, if it's just you as a couple, you could easily half this recipe, but I'm cooking for a family of 5, and I want to make sure everybody can enjoy a nice portion. So I'm getting this all nice and stirred here. The heat is starting to just barely wilt the collard greens, not really a lot at this point, but remember, they're going to be cooking for a lot longer here. All right, that looks really good and stirred. Since my hands are nice and clean, I'll just scrape that off with my spoon, put the lid on top, and I'm going to let them go for 2 minutes before I add the rest of my ingredients and let them cook for 45 minutes after that. Okay, so my collard greens have been cooking in the onions and garlic, salt and pepper and butter for a little over 2 minutes at this point. And if you look, they're starting to get this nice activation of the green color. They're shiny, which means they're starting to wilt. So I am going to add my 3 remaining ingredients, which is going to be a tablespoon of organic brown sugar. This gives it a little bit of sweet taste to it without being overly gushy. You may, depending on how your family likes things, you may want a little more, a little less. This is where you can get a little creative. As you can tell, we use a lot of apple cider vinegar around this house, whether canning or cooking, and I'm going to use a 1/2 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar in here. So this is giving it kind of that sweet tart taste. And then we're going to add 3 cups of organic chicken broth. Now, we make and can our own chicken broth from our leftover chicken backs and things, so that's what I'm using today. If you don't, we have the Shomer Aret's Farm chicken broth at the store that you can use as well in this recipe. So I'm adding in 3 cups of the chicken broth here. And then I'm going to stir this up really good because I want to make sure that the brown sugar and the apple cider vinegar have been distributed evenly throughout. And then we're going to let this recipe cook for 45 minutes. And what we're wanting to do is get the collard greens to be extremely tender. It also removes any bitter undertone to the collard greens and really enhances the flavor. So apple cider vinegar is used in a lot of like bone broth recipes to draw out the nutrients and the collagen from the bones. So one of the things that I noticed in this particular recipe is it really enhances the flavor that the collard greens have, and it also makes the brown sugar, it doesn't take a lot, but it makes it more poignant with a smaller amount. So I'm excited to share this dish to my family. So we're gonna let it cook. It's gonna come to a boil and simmer for 45 minutes at this point. So it's actually been about an hour. The recipe called for 45 minutes, and at that mark I noticed that there was still a little too much liquid in the dish for my liking. So I took the lid off to allow the broth to reduce. I also taste tested it, just as every good cook does, and noticed that I wanted a little bit more strength in the brown sugar and apple cider vinegar flavor. So I added a couple of extra tablespoons of brown sugar and an extra teaspoon of the Bragg's organic apple cider vinegar, and let it cook for an extra 15 minutes to reduce the liquid. So now you can see the collard greens are completely wilted, the onions are fully translucent and tender, the garlic is tender. It's a great consistency, and I'm getting ready to put this on the table for my family's lunch. So I hope you enjoy making this recipe and getting great nutrition as well as a very delicious flavor for your family as much as I enjoy doing it. Thanks. Stop in and see us at Whitaker's Natural Market, where we have a great selection of organic produce along with all of your supplement and natural health needs.